Welcome to Chess Corner channel, your basic guide to play chess. There are two pieces that have specialties in the game: the pawn and the king. Be reminded that this can only be done once. The pawn can capture a piece through en passant. This can only happen if you are playing white and your pawns are positioned at the 5th rank, and if you are playing black your pawns at the 4th rank. Let's demonstrate first for the white pieces. Say your pawn is at e5 and black responds with d5, you have the option to capture d5 and your pawn will go to d6 as a sign that you captured its d5 pawn. If you fail to capture on your turn and later decides to capture d5, then it is no longer allowed as you must capture right away when d5 move was made. For black we have its pawn at d4 and you as white replied with e4, then black can capture your e4 and place its d4 to e3. The next specialty for a pawn as mentioned before is that it can be promoted to another piece once it reached the 8th rank if playing white, and 1st rank if playing black. You can promote any pawns as desired as long as it is not captured by the enemy once it reached the 8th or 1st rank. Now let's look into the king. Being the main target of the game, you can temporarily safeguard your king from enemy attacks through castling. Castling can be done on your king side or to your queen side. Take note there are conditions that you must remember before you are allowed to castle. 1. There must be no pieces obstructing your path to castle either an enemy piece or your ally pieces. 2. The squares you need to pass through should not be controlled by your enemy or under attack. 3. Your king or rook must not been moved yet. The moment you move your king or rook then you are no longer allowed to castle. 4. You cannot castle when you are in a state of check. You must cover with an oath piece before you can castle. Now that you learned how the pieces moves, let us move forward with some terms you might heard of before you start to play the game. We said that our main target is the king, and as much as possible we want to checkmate the king. A checkmate is declared only if the king has no more safe square to run, since you control every possible square that it can go to. Let us see some examples. Sample number 1. King have no more place to go as all squares are controlled by black pieces. g5 by the black king. g4 by pawn. e3, f3, and g3 by queen. f5, e4 by bishop. e3, e4, e5 covered by the rook. And knight controlling the current square of the king f4, therefore the king is in check and since no more square to escape the check, then it is a checkmate. So this is your main goal of the game and you must always keep this in mind. Sample number 2. Here's a typical mate with the use of rook and king during an endgame. Rook from d7 going to h7 check, and at the same time a checkmate. Black king controls g6 and g4 squares. Rook covers the whole h-file. The king cannot capture the rook since it is one square away and as you learned earlier, the king can only move one square at a time. White king have no more else to go, so it's game over. There are other ways to come up with a checkmate with your pieces. Always go back to the basics of movement per piece. Here's another simple mate called back rank mate. White is mated as it cannot go to another square as it is blocked by its own pieces along f2 and h2 squares. Even if g2 square is opened, it is controlled by black knight and under attack. Rook at d1 square controlling the 1st rank where the king is located and white king have no defense to cover such attack. Last sample of a checkmate is called smothered mate. A type of mate where your king is simply surrounded by its own pieces and could no longer move. Bishop cannot take the knight as it will expose the king to the queen, and this is called a pin. The pin. A pin is something that can be done with the use of the queen, the bishop, or the rook. It simply means you are attacking an important piece, that if your opponent tries to remove its defense then you can grab the valuable piece of your opponent. Except for the king as it is not allowed to literally capture the king and remove from the board for this is an illegal move. An example of a pin to the knight attacking the king, white cannot remove this knight as it will expose its king to check, and that is a legal move to do and not allowed. If in tournaments and you accidentally exposed your king into check then call the arbiter in charge. A pin tries to immobilize your opponent and you can get ahead with the development of your pieces. Pin is not only directed as an attack to the king, but you can pin other pieces as well with higher values like the queen and rook. Here is a sample of a pin targeting the queen. Here is a pin targeting white's rook. Here is a type of pin in reverse which they call a skewer, where the lesser valuable piece is behind the pin. The fork. The fork can be done by any piece. When you hear the word, it simply means one piece is attacking two pieces at the same time. Most common with the pawn fork, a knight fork, the bishop fork as well. An example is shown as simply a pawn fork, which tries to capture the knight or the bishop. The remedy for this, if you can move one piece to attack your opponent's king or higher value without being captured, then you can escape such problem. Example of a fork with the use of a queen. Example of a fork with the use of the knight. Combine all of this and apply to your games as you progress and train yourself to discover and create such problems to your opponent with these tactics of forks and pins.